Hey, what's going on everybody? I'm AnimusJ and welcome to another Redstone tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about comparators, everything that a comparator is and does. This does require a basic understanding of redstone signals and how they work. If you missed out on my redstone school, check out that video. There should be a link popping up in the top right corner right now, but it covers the basic things of how to transfer redstone signals vertically and horizontally, how it interacts with certain blocks, and how it in general behaves. So in order to understand what a comparator is and does, you need to first understand how redstone signals travel. Just a reminder, in case you are deciding to skip the redstone school video, a full strength of redstone will travel for a total of 15 blocks. So I have a lever here, and if we count 15 blocks in this direction, we have this redstone lamp right here. And yes, I know it's a little bit weird of a texture. That's just the redstone texture pack that I have installed in order to make the redstone lines easier for you guys to see in this video. But you can see that this 15th block right here where the lamp is set, if I do this, you can see it turns itself off. All right, so this is 14 and then this is 15. You can see that this redstone signal right here glows from time to time, indicating that it is powered, whereas this one does not. This is block number 16. So redstone signals, a full redstone signal, will travel for 15 blocks in any direction, and that includes zigzags. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 powering this block on number 16 because it's touching it, whereas this being the 16th block itself, you can see that this signal is not powered. So our lamp is turned on, but it's receiving its power from the 15th block right here. Hopefully that is not confusing. And that's because without being able to understand this, you will not be able to understand all of this. I know it looks quite complicated, but we're going to get down and we're going to make it very easy to understand. A comparator has one single input, and that is off of the back of it. The two sides of the comparator are a comparing line, okay? So when you have stuff coming into the side of it, it is not going to put anything out of the front of it because this is only meant for comparing, not for outputting. If I put something into the back of it, you can see that the front of it does output a signal, okay? So behind the two poles right here is your input. On the other side of your single pole right here is your output, and on the two sides is your comparing line. Now we need to get through the boring and basic behaviors of a comparator in order to be able to understand the more fun and useful aspects of a comparator. So on the most basic level, a comparator will output whatever it is given as an input. So if I turn on this lever here, and you see I've marked it as 14, and that's because it's giving 14 to our comparator. 15 right here once it's on, so this is a full strength of 15, 14 into the comparator. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So I have 14 coming in, and if you look, now, the way I've done this, I've done it branched off to the side with lamps so you can see where the power is. But if you look 1, 2, and 3, okay, 4 and 5. Oops, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. So we have a power of 14 coming in. And if you look, we have 14 coming out. Now this is illuminated further as well, but remember we're going off to the side here. So if we counted straight, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, this is number 14 as well. Just this is going off to the side. It's an additional 14. Don't get confused by that. So because we have 14 going in, we have also 14 going out. Now if I turn on 10 right here, now mind you, this is 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. 10 is at the comparator. So then we have 10 coming out of the comparator. So whatever level this right here, this one right before the comparator is at, whatever signal strength it's at, is what the comparator is going to put out. So if we come back over to here and we look at our straight line, and if I were to put a comparator, this is 15. So if I put a comparator right here, this comparator is going to output 15. if we come all the way out to here where our signal strength, this is the very last one, meaning that this only has one more that it can go, then we're only going to get that one more. Right here we have, this is 2, so it's going to output 2. If I put it off of here, it's got 1, it's only going to output 1. Now, what do the compare lines do? What are those used for? Now, the first thing is that either side does not matter. There's no difference between the two sides. They both do the exact same thing. So you can use one or the other, or depending on what you're building, you can use both. So what a compare line does is it feeds a signal into the side of the comparator, and it says, in this case, 10. On the side, you have 10. Now, what the compare line does is it tells the comparator, unless your input, which is this line right here, has more than 10, do not output. So if I come back here and I turn on 5, notice we have no output at all. And that's because our input is less than our compare line. Now, if I come over here and I give it a 14 input, we have 10 compare, 14 input, and notice we do have an output. And so because of that, we have our normal 14 output. So if I come back here and I give this an 11, now we're going to have an 11 output, and that's because we have less of a compare. I've turned on the 10 right here. So it's saying if you have more than 10 coming on your input line, then go ahead and output like normal. Now, what if they are the same? In this case, we have a 10 right here and a 10 right here. Well, then it's just going to say, hey, it matches, no big deal, go ahead and output whatever you're given. So we have a 10 for an output. So if your compare line is greater than your input line, you will have no output. If your input is greater than your compare line, it will output as usual. And just to give you a demonstration, it does work on either side. So if we give that a 10, and if we do a strength of 11 right here, then we will get an output of 11. Now, let's talk about this little button right here. When you activate your comparator, you get this little light. That light is subtraction mode. So there is no addition mode. There is simply the comparing mode, and there is subtraction comparing mode. So if I turn my signal strength of 10 back on and I give it signal strength of 14, the difference between 14 and 10 is, of course, a 4. So you can see we have 4 outputted. 1, 2, 3, 4, or if we're going straight, the 4 right there. If I turn off my 14 and if I come back here to 10 and match the outputs, you can see that this time we have nothing, and that's because we are in subtraction. 10 minus 10 is 0. So we have no output. If I give it less of an output, so if we go 5 as well, we have no output as well. 5 minus 10 is obviously a negative number, and you can't do negative signals, so it just gives it nothing. If I have 10 here, and if I do 12 here, I have an output of 2, which I don't have a lamp for. Now, if we change this to a signal strength of 13 on the input, we have 10 on the compare, then we get 3 on the output, and that is because 13 minus 10 equals 3. So the compare line, the input line minus the compare line will be whatever your output is if you have it in subtraction mode. If you have it in normal mode, you will only get an output if your input is greater than your compare line, or if it is equal to it. And then if you have no compare line at all, your comparator will simply output the same as whatever it is given. In this case, it's given 13. And so that means that it is outputting 13 as well. Now, what that means is you can actually extend a signal by up to 2 blocks. So let's look at this line again. If I were to put a comparator on 13. So this is 15, 14, and 13. I'm going to have an output, excuse me, I'm going to have an input of 14 into it because it's taking the place of 13. And so what that's going to do is, remember, the comparator will output whatever its input is. So if the input is 14, now we're moving 14 up to here. So our 15 originally was right here, but when we move the comparator into here, we have 14 in, 14 out. So even though it goes 15, 14, nothing because the comparator is here, now we have 14 out again, and that extends our signal 2 more blocks, and now this redstone lamp is now illuminated. Now, a comparator can also take information from a storage device. There's actually a number of devices in Minecraft that a comparator can take information off of. And what it does is it reads the information from it, and then it outputs a signal according to what it's reading. In this case, we have an empty chest. If I were to add just 1 stack, you can see that we now have 1 single signal strength coming out. Now, the math for how it does this is quite complicated, but you can see that on the Minecraft wiki. But as I continue to fill up the chest, you're going to see our signal strength gets stronger and stronger until the point that when your item is completely full, or depending on what the item is, once it's at max, you will have your full signal strength of 15, which in this case I've left off just for the sake of room. Another thing to note about comparators and reading information is that they can also read information from 1 block away. So if I put 1 block between my comparator and my object that I'm trying to read, we can still pull the information through that block. Going a little bit further into the technical aspect of comparators, if I have a chest that is completely full right now, that is giving my comparator a signal strength of 15. So we are outputting a signal strength of 15 as well. Now, what happens if I turn on this compare of 14? Well, nothing happens because 15 input is greater than 14 compare. But the moment I take away anything from this chest, I lose full signal. So this is one easy way to tell if a chest is full. Rather than waiting until you have a full signal strength of 15, you can provide 1 redstone line with a power signal into it, giving it basically 14, so that until you have a full chest, you will have no power at all. Now, given that comparators will always output what they are given, by placing 2 comparators in opposite directions but next to each other, loop them with redstone like so, give them just momentary power, you make a pulse extension. So the way that this works is when I first give this power, we are creating 15 right here, and we are outputting 15, 14. So then this one outputs 14, 13, and then this guy outputs 13, 12, and then they constantly step each other down until there's no power left. Right now it's permanently powered because I have this, but the moment I turn it off, you'll see it slowly decreases. Now we can demonstrate that a little bit. If I put some redstone lamps next to them, you'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly. So there you go, and I don't know why it flashed like that. That's a bug on Bedrock. It does that sometimes. But you can see it slowly steps down your signal strength, and that's because it's looping. It's giving this one originally a 14 down to a 12, and so it's stepping down the signal strength each time that the signal loops around. One of the most common uses for pulse extenders is in giving yourself more time to be able to walk through a door or piston door. Since a pulse extender will give you just a little bit of extra time, but not too much, you can put them on a door or piston activated door in order to give yourself a little bit more time to be able to walk through them, but not too much time. Now, moving up a little bit in our level of technicality on comparators is how we can empty things inside of a dropper or dispenser. So if I were to place some items into this dropper right here, you can see this comparator creates a bit of a clock that will dispense or drop all of these items until it is completely empty. Once the comparator detects that there is nothing left in the dropper, it will then turn off and your clock will go away. So you're not wasting time with a constant clock that ticks no matter what. This dropper will only spit things out when it has something inside of it to spit out. So how does this work exactly? I've broken down the steps that this little circuit goes through in order to help you guys understand exactly what's happening with the comparator, the redstone, the repeater, and the dropper to make the dropper spit out the items the way that it does. So in the first step, we have just one item in here. We have the observer in here. And so our comparator says, hey, I'm detecting an item, so it outputs a signal. And then we have a repeater just strengthening that signal, because if we were to loop that signal back around, we lose it after just one. So the second step in the circuit is to compare the output back to the comparator again in order to turn it off. Because remember, if your compare line is greater than your input, then you will have no output. So unless your dropper is completely full, your comparator is not going to have a full signal strength of 15. In this case, I've filled it up with swords just to make it full. But what we have with the repeater is we have a signal strength of 15 here, 14, 13, and 12. So then we're comparing 12 compare line. And over here, I just have the one redstone torch, which is giving us a 1 in output. Input and output. So 12, because the compare line is greater than the input line, what that does is it then turns your signal off. Okay, I know this is a little bit complicated, a little hard to understand, but stick with me and I promise it'll make sense. Item enters the dropper, outputs a signal. Then the comparison of that signal is stronger than the input of that signal, which then shuts off your circuit. But then because your circuit is off, you still have an item inside of your dropper, and your comparator says, oh, hey, look, I found an item, and it turns back on again. So this creates your loop, okay? So the stages this is going through is detects an item, outputs a signal, compares the signal, turns off, refines the item, re-output, recompare, turns off, turns back on. So that is why we have this loop right here. Then in order to activate the dropper and spit out the item, all we got to do is add a block with a redstone line on top, and you'll see we're constantly comparing the line to the input and spitting the item out as it shuts itself off and turns itself back on again. And then, of course, once your dropper is completely empty, your comparator will detect nothing and the circuit will shut down. In order to prevent yourself from having an instance like this one, where your dropper becomes completely full and your circuit freezes up, what you want to do is you want to hold your items in some kind of storage above the dropper. Usually a hopper would be ideal, and what that'll do is that'll make sure that the items as they go in will never fill the dropper up all the way, because they have to filter through the hopper first. So then the only thing left to discuss is what all can be used with a comparator, and that is all of these items that you see pictured right here. All of these items interact with comparators in different ways depending on what the object is, but in general, furnaces, blast furnaces, and smokers, it all depends on how much you have cooking inside of it. Same thing with your brewing stand, droppers and dispensers, and minecart hoppers on top of a detector rail will all output signals depending on how many items are in them. Same with a hopper, chest, trap chest, shulker box. Jukeboxes can detect, jukeboxes will compare and output signals depending on what record they are playing. So if you put in a certain record, it's going to output a certain signal. Cakes, depending on how much cake is there or not there. A end portal stone, or whatever this is called, will compare outputs, whether it has an Eye of Ender in it or not. Cauldrons and composters will give signals according to how full they are. Same thing with beehives and bee nests. Item frames, depending on which orientation the item inside it is spun at, will output a certain signal. Same thing with a lectern, depending on what page it's on. And then command blocks, well, command blocks are a whole other animal. That is it for today's video, you guys. I hope that cleared a whole bunch of things up. I hope that comparators are a little bit easier for you to understand and use in your world. Hopefully I've given you some tips, some cool circuits that you will be be able to use. If I did, make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe. But that's it for today, guys. I'm AnimusJ, and I'll see you next time.